Welcome to this presentation of the Gorgias Cloud system. After logging in, I come to this panel. For this presentation, I'm going to show you how to create a new project with a Gorgias file and then execute it and try it. The first move is to click on My Projects option on the top right, and then you can see all your projects. You see that each project is in the form of a folder. All right. Let's assume that we want to build the following decision policy. An agent will normally buy an item that it needs. In the case that it is low on funds, the agent will not buy an item that is not urgently needed. All right, let's think about it a little. What are the options here? The options are either to buy an item or to not buy the item. So let's try to start thinking on the policy. I will put this project in the assistance folder. Here you can see a number of files related to the assistance project. It's an overall project. It has a lot of Gorgias files. You see them here. These are decision policies. It has some test files and also a background file in a prologue file. Now we'll create a new one. It will be a decision policy, so it's a Gorgias file, and I will name it buy or not buy. Buy or not buy. Here is the editor. Now I will start by building arguments. Let's think now. What is the first argument? I have an argument for buying an item. When do I buy an item? When I need an item. All right, let's try to write it now in the Gorgias format. So Gorgias arguments are given in the form of rules using this predicate rule that has as a first variable the label of the rule. Let's call it R1. Then the head of the rule, the decision, all right, to buy an item. Now, why did I use the item as a variable there? Because I could write buy item as a predicate without variables. I prefer to write it like this because when I decide if I will buy an item or not, sometimes this decision may be dependent on the item itself. However, in this case, this is not mandatory. I could use the other option as well. And then I put the knowledge that is related with this decision. It can be either a divisible knowledge or it can be a non-divisible knowledge. In this case, I will assume that to need an item is something that is not divisible. So this is the rule. Since I have a variable in the predicate, it is good practice to add it in the head of the rule, in the label of the rule, because it will be used later for matching this rule with priorities. We will see it in while we edit the rules. Let's try the second one now to see what is the argument for not buying an item. Now, this sentence here says that in the case that it is low on funds, it refers to agent. The agent will not buy an item that is not urgently needed. Okay. What is the object level rule for not buying an item? In my opinion, it is that the fact that it is not urgently needed. If I don't urgently need an item, I will not buy it, and that's it. This context here will help me decide in contrast to this general rule. This is the general rule. This is what's going on most of the time. However, in this context, when I'm low in funds, this rule gets priority. So I will use this knowledge, the fact that an item is not urgently needed, in order to write an object level rule for not buying an item. You can think of the object level rule as the rule that unlocks a possibility, unlocks an option. And in this case, to make it possible for an agent to not buy an item is the fact that it's not urgently needed. Going back to the editor, I will need another argument. You see here I have this nice button there to start me, to get me on. Let's name it R2, again for an item. The position or the head of the rule is to not buy an item. We write with the negation predicate, which is, this negation is negation without failure. So to not buy an item, the conditions is that I do not urgently need it. Let's assume that this is divisible to urgently need or not urgently need an item. So it's a negation here, urgently need the item. So in this case, I do not have non-divisible premises, just the negation of urgently needing an item. Another parenthesis here. And this is my second argument, my second Gorgias rule. Now the first one is the default. So when I need an item, I buy the item. So I can write that using a preference rule. You see again there is a label. Let's name this priority one for an item. I do not forget the variables at the heads, and I prefer, look what I must put here. I must put a label. I prefer this rule, the label. I use the label of the rule. I prefer this rule to this one. This is the general case. So I have no divisible premises, and I don't have non-divisible premises. There is an exception, however. When I'm low in funds, I will not buy the item. So I want R2 to have more priority than R1 in the case that I am low on funds. So I need here another preference rule. I would prefer to copy this one now. There, it will be PR2. This reverses the previous preference. Reverses, now I prefer R2 over R1, in which case, when I'm low on funds, I will use it again as a divisible knowledge item, because I'm not sure what does it mean to be low on funds. It will depend on the context of the agent. So now I'm finished with writing this theory. Here I have two conflicts. One is the rule R1 with R2 because they have a contrary conclusion, and the other is between the priority rules as the preference is reversed. So one attacks the other. All right. So if I leave it like this, when I'm low on funds, both preference rules will have the same strength. So I need to add another preference rule to indicate, let's write that this is a context rule, again on item, that I prefer this time this rule here, PR2, over PR1 as a default, without divisible or non-divisible premises. Now my theory is ready. What else can I do? The next thing that I can do is to add what we call abducibles. Using abducibles, I can define beliefs or divisible knowledge that can be assumed when taking the decision. Let's play with this theory and say that we can have abducibles, and the abducible is whether I urgently need an item or not. So this negation here is an abducible. I can assume it at any time. I will also add as an abducible the possibility to need the item. This is a common approach. When we put abducibles, we put both the positive and the negation, so that both can be assumed and the user is hinted to define one or the other if he wants to be sure about the decision he's taking. So now our policy is complete. We save it. These are some prologue warnings. Okay, it's because we use the item as a variable in heads of rules that do not have it as a variable in their conditions. So it's a normal prologue warning. Now that my file is saved, I can consult it. I open it and I consult it. And now I can start testing it here in this panel. So I can see the file if I want here, my policy, and now I can start testing. So for example, I can say that I need a hat. I need a hat. Now, do I have an argument for buying a hat? Yes, I do. R1 rule states that if I need an item, I buy the item. And this is what is given to me here, both in internal explanation, the argument that produces this query that I asked, and both the explanation in human readable format. The statement to buy a hat is supported by the predicate that I need the hat. I could also write a question with a variable. Is there anything that I should buy? Imagine you have an agent and you have a cycle of decisions, and now he wants to see if there's something he wants to buy. Yes, there is something to buy, and this is a hat. This is the instantiation, and you see the variable, the argument here in human readable format as well. Do I have an argument for not buying the hat or anything? No, I don't have such an argument. All right, let's now state that I'm low on funds. Low on funds. Oops, low on funds is a divisible knowledge. You see it's in the brackets here in the rule predicate. It's not like need item, a condition that is non-divisible in this prologue rule. So in order to say that this agent is low funds, I have to write it as a rule. I need to put a label to it, D1 for example, it's my divisible knowledge 1. I also need to state if there are conditions for it, like a normal rule. This is the way to assert this knowledge. And now I can ask again if I should buy something. And you see, yes, I should buy something, and this is a hat. And I should buy it because I need it. And you see here, I have something that supports my decision. The fact that I urgently need this hat. It's an assumption that I need to confirm. Now, if I try to see now if I shouldn't buy, let's write hat here explicitly. This hat, yes, I have an argument for this too. And you see, I shouldn't buy a hat when I do not urgently need it and I'm low on funds. And this reason is stronger than buying it when I need it. However, this supporting condition that I don't urgently need this hat is an assumption that I need to confirm. So you see now, by having them as abducibles, I can support both decisions. They're both credulous. One because I urgently need it, and the other because I don't urgently need it. So now the agent needs to consult its theory and decide if it urgently needs this hat or not. Let's suppose that it doesn't urgently need this hat. And not only that, this is also, as you see, this is also a divisible knowledge. So I have to dress it again. I have to dress it again as a rule. Divisible 2, divisible knowledge 2. I don't need this hat. And there are no conditions. And this is my second assumption, my second belief here. So now if I wonder if I should not buy the hat, you see that I have now a concrete argument to not buy the hat because I do not urgently need it. And if I try to buy it, now this is not credulously decided, you see that this is false. There's no argument now for buying a hat. Now thank you very much for following this tutorial. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to send me an email. Just a final remark, if you go down here, you can find the API for Gorgias Cloud. You can find this documentation, which you can find by clicking here in API docs, and you see the API in JSON format. You can copy it and then find an online service like the Swagger editor. I can select the sample that it has here, select all and paste. I want to convert from JSON to YAML, yes. And now here you see the documentation for the API of Gorgias Cloud. So you see here we have APIs to do any of these things that we did using the web interface, like to execute a query, this is the most important, But you can also add a theory, create a new project, delete a file, delete a project. Do whatever you can do with the web interface, you can do it using the API. Thank you again for following me. If you go back to the Gorgias B site here, and you go to the Gorgias Cloud entry, you see all this information like where you connect, how to contact the administrator, the playlist for tutorials, and also examples on how to use the API in Python, Java, and PHP. You can see templates here to help you and guide you to making it true.